Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and this, of course, as always, is my co-host.
And I am Chris Huddleston.
And today we are excited to be talking to you about the 2020 recent film, Possessor.
You have a very special nature. One we've worked hard together to unlock. Pull me out. The results are normal. Anything you want to flag?
No, I'm fine.
Mom! Hi, darling.
How was your trip?
Dull. Extraordinarily dull.
Our next contract's a big one. The target is the CEO of the largest operation in the U.S. You'll be binding to Colin Tate. We can't afford any mistakes on this one.
Ready?
What's with you today?
What do you mean? I'm in place.
Can we help you?
Finish this.
What are you doing? I can't pull the trigger.
I need to know. I need to know what she's done to me.
It's become a danger.
Where is she? Come out or I'll do it!
Sometimes that small thought is all it takes to lose control.
Okay, good trailer. Do you have a synopsis for us, Chris?
I do. And as you said, the 2020 recent film, so this is not a 30 or 40-year-old movie like a lot of the things that we watch. So definite spoiler alert for this.
Definite spoiler. We are going to talk about it and all of it right up front. So if you haven't seen Possessor and you want to go into it with unsullied expectations, please don't listen to this podcast right now. Go watch the movie and then listen to this podcast.
Exactly. So 2020 Canadian film directed by Brandon Cronenberg, who is the son of David Cronenberg, and it stars Andrea Riseborough as Tasia Voss, who is an assassin. She works for an agency or a corporation. We can talk about that. It's not exactly clear. And the way the assassinations work is her employer implants her consciousness into the body of someone close to the target of the assassination. So a family member or a friend or an employee or someone like that. So she inhabits this person or possesses them. And at the point that we are introduced to her in the movie, it seems that she has been doing this for a while, and it's starting to take a toll on her, and in terms of being able to control the person that she is possessing. The idea is that she would have total control so she can take out the assassination, but she's starting to have difficulty with that. We see the first hit job that we see from her in the movie. She's supposed to shoot the person, and instead she stabs them, and then she is supposed to shoot herself in the mouth so that the person is dead, and she's not able to do that. And then the rest of the movie is she moves on to her next hit job, where she inhabits the body of a man who is dating a woman whose father is this powerful CEO. And when she possesses him, she has even more trouble taking control. So then we can start from there with the discussion, I'd say. What did you think of this, Chris?
I enjoyed it. Having just played the trailer, I will say that the tone of the film does not quite match the tone of the trailer. The tone of the trailer is pulse quickening, high tension horror.
Mm-hmm.
Or, possibly that end of the, kind of thriller genre. And what I felt like watching the film is it's definitely bloody. There is a horror element there's a lot of stabbing. There's some gunshots. There's a lot of bleeding. But the overall tone of the film is one of, I want to say, sort of fatigue and sadness. Like those are the emotional things I experience the most on the screen. And it's like a tension throughout. Even the moments of high impact where a murder is taking place, and there's a number of scenes where somebody is either repeatedly stabbing or there's a meat cleaver scene where somebody's just whack 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 with a meat cleaver. I felt a disconnect watching those scenes. Like it didn't wrench in my gut the way I imagined it was intended to. But I mean, I did enjoy the movie. I didn't really watch it as a horror movie. I actually
didn't think
sort of
so either.
watched it
Yeah.
as a sci-fi movie that, there's a sort of a branch of sci-fi that is kind of high concept, that it's more about this premise of being able to possess another person. Oh, there's an implant in the head. And that, what are the implications of taking over somebody's consciousness? What are the mechanics of that? They talk about, if you see any, and pixelating isn't the word, artifacting, or, they have these sort of techno terms for what we who follow the main character see that she is experiencing these things that are supposed to be red flags. So to me, it felt more in the sort of cerebral end of science fiction. There aren't spaceships flying around, but there is this kind of near future magical technology of mind control. But then it sort of plays out like a thriller, like The Boss. To what lengths will the boss go to control this agent who she professes to like, but you don't really believe? You know what I mean? It felt more like a thriller and a spy thing. I'm hearing you agree. What are your thoughts?
So, what you're saying there, it definitely the trailer, and this has been, this has been described as a horror movie, and on IMDb it's listed as, I think, horror, sci-fi, and thriller. So the main character here, played by Andrea Riseborough, she, this actor is in one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes. And this
sorry, if I can just interject for one quick second. I'm sorry to break your thought. It's definitely marketed as horror.
Yeah.
Like if you look on the podcast and you can see the art that I added, I just, it's stock that I pulled off of the, just Google it to find this
creepy
image of the sort of someone wearing a face like a skin mask. It's clearly, and listen to the trailer, it's clearly marketed as horror. It's not ambiguous in the marketing.
No.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
I just want to get that thought in there. So one of your favorite Black Mirror episodes.
Yeah, she's in one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes, which is called Crocodile. And I think it's interesting because this feels a lot like maybe a feature-length Black Mirror episode. It has that kind of tone. Like you said, it's more, it's not really, there's a little bit of action in it. It's not really an action thing. It's meant to be thought-provoking sci-fi.
Which one is Crocodile? Because I have watched all the Black Mirror, but I don't remember all
Crocodile
of
is
them
the
from the
one.
episode.
Crocodile is the one where they have a. I think everybody has like a camera implanted in their eye, and they can. So when there's a crime or some kind of an accident, the insurance companies will come in and they can view the recording that the like anybody who witnesses that. So I don't want to say too
Oh,
much if people haven't seen this,
yeah.
because
No,
I
I
do you
remember
remember
that
this
one.
when
And
she's
things
like in a
it sort of spins out of control. She's like a corporate person, and
yeah
things kind of go sideways. And the more she tries to correct it, that particular technology you described keeps driving things, which, nobody makes her do anything, but she
right
keeps going to further and further extremes to try and stay out of the hot seat,
right
basically.
but
Yeah, I remember that now. That's a good one.
yeah, I like that one a lot. It has I like the ending is pretty great. Um, but yeah, this and all of the Black Mirror episodes, they're all kind of depressing, and so this has some of that
Bleak,
bleak.
usually.
Yeah, this has some of that bleak feel, and I thought it was interesting some of the ideas that they're kind of exploring here. It made me these are two very, very different movies, but it made me think some of there's a George Clooney movie from 10 or 12 years ago called The American. Have you ever seen it?
Hmm.
In where he's an assassin, and I
In Italy.
in Italy, yeah. And the interesting thing about the movie is it presents, I think, what being an assassin in real life would be like, much more so. It's not like James Bond where it's you're driving around in fancy cars and sleeping with beautiful women and everything. It would be this very isolated existence because you couldn't get close to anybody because they're probably going to get killed, and all of that. So there's some of that feeling in this, and there's also this kind of exploration of what is a person's identity. She is, and we don't know if she's always been this way or it's just the job has done this to her, but she's married and has a son, and she's separated from the husband. And there's a scene right after she gets out of the first hit job that we see that she does in the movie. She goes to see her husband and her son, and she's rehearsing what she's going to say to them. And then later in the movie, we see when she's going to take her next job, um, to take over the person's identity, she rehearses. She's recording the guy speaking, and so she's rehearsing, trying to sound like his speech pattern and all of that. So you get kind of this feeling that at this point in her life, does she even have a real identity? She has to practice to go and speak with her husband, and I thought that was interesting how they handled that. But as you say,
Yeah.
it's with the trailer, it's definitely presented as a horror movie, and I think, as I remember, I think I've only watched the trailer once or twice, but it seemed like it's presented as being really trippy, and there's a little bit of that in this, but not a whole lot. It's pretty this isn't a movie where I feel like not everything is spoon-fed to you, but it's not all that ambiguous. I mean, I think you kind of understand by the end, really what's going on. But
Yeah, the only part of it that was a mystery to me was once we got sort of deep into it, and they set it up. They say, after 3 days or something like that, the risk of you losing cohesion or whatever they call it
mhm.
goes way up. And guess what? We get there, and there comes a period where you're not sure who's driving. So she is possessing the body of a young man, I don't know, they're about the same age, whatever, of a man. And we see him at one point sort of wrest control back.
Right.
And but then she kind of gets the driver's seat again, But then it kind of goes back and forth, and there's a period where you're not sure scene to scene precisely who's driving. And that's the only part where I was like, wait, did he do that or did she do that? Or
Right.
does it matter? And then we get to an end that isn't exactly a twist, but it's, it's kind of messed up conceptually. But like, I think a really effective twist needs to have like a sixth sense, like, oh my God, I totally didn't see that coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the Matrix when he wakes up and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Early on when he wakes up in the future. And this one, there's sort of, you're like, what? And then you go, oh, snap, that is dark. But it didn't get more intense than that for me.
Right.
And I think it's because, okay, well, we're spoiling it, right?
Yeah, you can go ahead and say what happened.
So her controller or her boss or whatever, turns out that she's sort of plugged in and has possessed the woman's son.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the son stabs her, the quote unquote son stabs her, and she shoots the quote unquote son, and who's acting weird. And you don't realize what's going on until then they kind of pull the masks off, and then the woman is back. She's out, and she looks over, and her boss / friend / superior or whatever is lying there, and you realize that she was plugged in as the son. And the messed up thing is, so yes, she went in to save her, but she also went in to, to get rid of this, what she perceived as the complicating factor in this sort of agent's life, which is the husband and son. And that's great on paper. I don't want to seem overly harsh, but I didn't really care.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't like, no, not the boy.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't. The whole thing felt sort of sad and disconnected. And I think part of the problem is, in a James Bond movie, you're rooting for James Bond. Even if the spy that you're supposed to be rooting for is a complicated anti-hero, like even if you don't approve of the mission they're on, the idea is that you're rooting for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I ever felt like I was particularly rooting for her in this movie. I mean, it seemed like what she was doing was very corporate and very dirty.
Yeah.
Like, just they're hired assassins. It's not even like a secret government agency, trying to root out the bad people on the planet because nobody else will sanction it. No, it's just a corporate thing of like, who can we kill to get ourselves ahead?
Yeah,
right?
they were literally, they didn't tell you with the first one, but with the second one, which comprises most of the story, they're wanting to kill the CEO so they can take over his company,
And they're doing it by possessing this schlub, basically, who happened to be having a relationship with the rich CEO's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And, the guy is sort of a patsy, and the young woman is sort of an entitled,
Rich
brat.
rich daughter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, whether you fault her for that or not, she's hard to be sympathetic to. She didn't do anything wrong, but super entitled. And the boss, played by Sean Bean, which is fun because I love Sean Bean, is a total jerk. I mean, he is an absolute a-hole.
Yeah.
So it's not like you care about him getting killed per se, but it is a stone cold murder for nothing other than profit motives. It's not like we need to kill him because he's a bad guy. It's we need to kill him so we can take his company. And there, at the very least, murdering a guy who is a jerk, but also murdering his daughter, who, yes, is entitled, but didn't really do anything wrong. And more importantly, murdering this young guy who's just happened to sort of be in a relationship with the daughter. So you think, wow, it's like, I guess, so you're kind of the bad guys. I mean, why are we supposed to be rooting for you?
Yeah, that struck me watching it. I was thinking, exactly what you're saying. If it's just a normal assassin situation, the assassin goes and kills the person, and that's it. But with this, the whole idea is to make it look as if this other person, they just went crazy or whatever, or they hated the person, whatever. So then it's like all these lives are being destroyed, to take this one person out instead of kind of the traditional, I guess you'd say, assassin,
Yeah.
kind of method of it's just
Right. I mean, if you shot somebody with a sniper rifle through their plate glass window, you'd get that person dead, but it would be obvious that they were assassinated.
right.
This is a way of doing it to make it look like, uh-oh, perfectly human things went sort of horribly wrong, and person X, Y, and Z ended up dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of a murder suicide by this disturbed individual, and case closed. Right. And part of the need for the possessed to put a gun in their mouth and blow their brains out that way is that they abduct the person first in a van, and they implant this little port in the top of their head to
Right.
get into their brain. And if you put a bullet through that and you blow the back of your head off, there goes the evidence of that too.
Yeah.
So they don't, if you cut your own throat, or somebody else has to come in and slit your wrists, there's your corpse, but it's got this weird jack in its head. And,
Mm-hmm.
Investigators would say, what's that thing? Right.
Right.
I mean, it's a big loose thread. I did think it was interesting. Like, I think that relatability problem is at the core of why this movie didn't feel more engaging in an empathetic way to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's at the core of my issue. If I'm going to criticize it, that's at the core of that. There was lots. I mean, the performances are good. I think that they play around with a lot of interesting stuff. Like, the woman is the assassin, the lead is clearly sort of losing her mind.
Yeah.
Right. So when she's rehearsing to talk with her family, I did feel a pang of sympathy for that. I'm like, well, I don't know why you're choosing to do this. She seemed almost addicted to it. Like, she couldn't wait to get away from them. She's like, oh, work called. Work didn't call. You feel the need to get back in the saddle, like an addict. But her husband was weird. Like, the person playing her husband was weird, and the son
Yeah. Did
didn't
that?
seem particularly. I was like, is that deliberate, or is it just a weird casting thing?
That struck me too. The guy's voice. I kind of thought, I hope this guy isn't in this a lot, because he sounded almost like a cartoon voiceover actor or something. You know what I mean? It seemed out of place for how.
What was that accent? Was that like Brooklyn accent or
I
something?
don't know.
It was
I
almost
mean,
like, babe, what are you talking about? I mean, it's not that, but
Yeah.
it's thick like that. And he wasn't acting a cartoon performance. There were some shots where he was like, I hate this. Why do you have to keep leaving? And he was sincere. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that the guy's a bad actor. And I think that's just his voice. But
everybody else
it
was
was a
very
really-
subtle, kind of, and then he
Yeah.
kind of stood out.
It was a really thick, specific regional accent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to be like a New York accent. And the whole thing felt kind of Canadian to me. So I'm like,
yeah, it's a Canadian movie. Yeah. It
why
was shot
is
in
this
Toronto.
guy, not that a New Yorker can't move to Canada, but it felt like such a specific thing for no reason.
Yeah.
And it was never addressed or discussed, and I found it distracting.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way. That it's interesting that that you brought that up. But
I felt like, the reason you have this husband and kid there is you want her, you're like, oh no, the family, the loving husband, the great kid. Like, we want her to want to be back a part of that. And then when she kills the husband, it's supposed to be a Hamlet, like, no, no, and then when the son dies, you're like, no, no. And I just didn't care 1 ounce. I could not have cared less.
well, and in that scene,
So-
she says, it's that's kind of a major point in the scene there, where she's struggling back. It's like she's struggling with the guy she's inhabiting for the consciousness, and they actually show, for you to have a visual representation of it, they show the man and her standing there in this kitchen while the guy is holding the gun to her husband's head, and she says, I don't know. Basically, she says, I don't know if I even love him, if I ever even loved him. And I kind of wondered, I might be reading too much into this.
Right, and just to clarify, she is in
Yeah.
the guy's head.
Yeah.
But she is having a conversation with the guy who is now back in control.
Right.
And he is trying to threaten her, who is in his head. But we see it on screen as her standing there in the kitchen with him. And so he's threatening to kill the husband. And she's saying, sort of trying to
Go
talk him
ahead.
out of it, being like, well, she's saying go ahead, but it's kind of like, you're not really going to hurt me by killing him.
Yeah.
There won't be any point to you doing that. You'll just be murdering a guy.
Right. But
Like, you're here because you're trying to get back at me, but this is not really the way to do it.
Yeah.
And he kills him anyway.
But I kind of wondered, and I might be reading too much into this, but I kind of wondered, we don't know how long she's been an assassin. We don't know how many people she's killed. And I kind of wondered if how much influence maybe a past person that she had possessed, because we don't know,
Right.
if she carries these people's memories around with her or if they're totally wiped or
Right.
what. But I kind of wondered maybe if it was really somebody that she had possessed was in love with this guy, and maybe
Oh, that's interesting.
like I say, I could be reading too much into it, but I kind of wondered if it was just like, well, she got involved with this guy because someone prior to this actually loved him, and she had some, remnant of that. Because we see her once she inhabits this man, I think Tate is his name, and Colin Tate is his name, where she's going and kind of watching through the window. And there's actually a scene where he goes and, that's where he goes to fight them. But he goes and talks to the boy outside. So, she's kind of looking at them from afar. And I'm sure that probably, maybe that happened with other of the identities that she was involved with. I don't know.
I would like to also take a moment and be like, I feel like I'm harshing a lot on this movie, but I did enjoy it. I thought it was a good film.
Mm-hmm.
It was good enough that I feel like I can pick it apart. So I'm not, this is not saying, hey, don't go see this film, as much as like, it was good enough that I saw what I feel like it was going for, and we're sort of picking apart the ways in which, at least I'll speak for myself, the ways in which I felt it didn't quite deliver on what I perceived it was going for.
Yeah.
And I just want to, as we continue to pick at it here, I want to be like, I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff. And my favorite stuff about it was, like you're discussing, it was interesting to see. It didn't spoon feed you a lot of answers to this stuff. And it was really fertile stuff to be like, oh, is it maybe this is, there were layers upon layers of this whole mind possession stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting to watch her inhabit this guy and wake up in bed with his girlfriend and make love to his girlfriend and know that it's this person who really knows nothing about this guy, like has watched him for a day, She doesn't, it's not like he's been her next door neighbor for, she just plops right into this to be this person. And the girlfriend notices it right away. She's like, you're acting weird today.
Yeah.
And that was pulse quickening, because you're like, oh man, I wouldn't want to pretend to literally be somebody else, not knowing anything about them or how they talk, or would they say this or that, or, we really got your mind spinning in a lot of this. What would it be like to have to not just portray someone else, but be that person.
Go and do their
convincingly.
job. I was thinking about, so he works.
Yeah.
So this company, I guess they make blinds and curtains and things like that. I don't know, but he had to go and I didn't completely understand what it exactly was that they were doing. But
I have thoughts on that.
Oh, okay.
But finish yours. And
But
then I'll,
he worked in this kind of lowly department in the company where they would have VR glasses and they would see in these people's homes or apartments or whatever, and they were identifying what kind of, blinds or curtains or whatever they had. And he or she, when she first starts doing it, is having some difficulty. And you kind of get the idea that maybe then his memory is starting to take over a little bit. So there had to be some of the person's memory in there, or else she would have just had no clue how to do this job. But she wasn't doing very well with it. But I just thought, man, how stressed, she has just a tiny bit of preparation, I guess, before she goes into these people. And think about, not just having to inhabit a person's life enough to convince their spouse or their friends or their family members or whatever that they're who they are, but to go and try to do their job that you would have no, understanding of at all. And I just thought that would really be stressful, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my take on that job was that it was like a Facebook or an Amazon, that it had whatever it was, it had control of all the cameras in people's homes. So what he was doing in the movie they acknowledge as a lowly job was put on these goggles, and his supervisor says, "Okay, you're on curtains and blinds today," and he was like, "Okay," and one of the scenes where he gets hung up, she gets hung up as him, is that it's a bedroom and it's a couple having sex, and he gets distracted by that, and he's supposed to be making notes on the curtains and blinds. And my impression was that there were multiple people, stream by stream, each assigned to like data mine every aspect of what was in that picture. So not just, so-and-so is having sex with such and such, but this is the kind of bedspread they have. This is the kind of bed.
Yeah.
This is the kind of curtains they have. It's this is the kind of color paint they have. Like data mining every possible, in the most dispassionate but most invasive way possible.
Right.
Which is how this a-hole Sean Bean guy got so rich, because it's like he's Zuckerberg plus Bezos plus Bill Gates, like all all in one, learning everything about everybody, not to blackmail them, but to like learn everything about them and market
to sell to them.
Yeah, to know them better than they really even understand that they know themselves.
Right.
And what was interesting to me about that was they didn't talk about it in the film, but it's like, in a world where you can implant into somebody else's brain, AI hasn't gotten good enough that you need a person to sit there and register what kind of blinds there are. I mean, couldn't a computer take that same image and see that is model whatever of blind,
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the computer couldn't, those static elements of a room, a computer couldn't. Why do you need a bank of people? In the movie, it serves to show that the father has given this future son-in-law the most degrading, soul grinding, miserable, he's given him a job in the company, but it's the pinnacle of insulting jobs in the company.
And he insults him further because
to his face.
When he meets him, he's like, "Oh, I hope the job's, not too difficult for you." Or
he's an absolute monster.
Yeah.
It's really cruel. And
now I
like Sean Bean. I've never seen Sean Bean be such a despicable character.
Yeah. There's a British sitcom. I think they only did like 8 or 10 episodes, and I can't remember what it's called, but where this guy it's just these nerdy people that have like a bookshop or something like that. And this one guy, he kind of, when he fantasizes or he goes to sleep and he dreams, he goes into this world where basically his subconscious is Sean Bean, as like this kind of gladiator guy. I don't know. It's but it's really, really funny. I'll have to come up with the name of it and tell you what it is.
He's a gladiator guy played by Sean Bean.
Played by Sean Bean.
His fantasy self is Sean Bean.
No, it's like in his mind, it's like
in the fantasy
Sean
he's like
Bean.
He's not.
Yeah, it's the actor Sean Bean, playing the character. He's not really a gladiator; he's like a knight, but it's like he gives them these pep talks and things about how to. But it's comedic. It's really, I'm kind of butchering uh, the gist of it, but I'll come up with a name and tell you. But it's a really great role for him because he's really funny in it. He's still like badass Sean Bean, but he's funny. But um, a, another thing that I wondered what your take on it was. Why do you think where like the first woman that she's in she's supposed to shoot the guy and instead she stabs him, and then when she's in the man who is supposed to kill Sean Bean, again she's supposed to shoot, and he has like a poker from a fireplace, and he beats him to death and stabs him through the face and everything with that. How did
I
you
don't
take
think
that?
I don't think does kill him though, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's true. He's alive
maims
at the
him,
end.
but
Yeah.
doesn't even get the job done. But does relentlessly, like sociopathically, wail on him with it. I don't know. I don't know. I have some hypotheses. Well, I have an hypothesis is that because we don't have any other evidence of we don't have any other evidence associated with it. Like there's no reason like, oh, this is that thing coming out, right? It's just a pattern we see develop with this person when she's under. Stabs the first guy not once, but like really goes after him with a knife, and you're like, yo, what's happening? And then you see it established again with Sean Bean, and I can only think that it's supposed to be a sort of an indicator that she's been doing this too long, and there are these artifacts and weird reality things happening that she's becoming psychopathic, like she's having a psychotic break,
Mm-hmm.
and that is one sign of it. And I feel like it's slightly different than the inability to put the gun in their mouth and kill herself. That's either a subconscious thing, or the person doesn't want to do that somehow, or she's losing control, and there's just enough of the person inside the self-preservation instinct that is keeping her from doing it. But I don't know. The film doesn't give us any more clues to answer that. What did you think?
What I thought was, so I definitely thought that in both instances when the person didn't shoot themselves, that was their
Will to live.
Yeah, their will to live, them having enough control to keep that from happening. But I kind of took the way that each of them, the target was killed or attempted to be killed, by shooting them, that's kind of this impersonal, efficient way of doing it, right? Which is what the company wanted her to do. And I kind of took that as, with the first one stabbing the guy a bunch of times, and then also with this Tate beating the guy with the poker, I kind of took that as they were having more control than what she was, and they hated these people. So it was, the way they were killing them was much more personal and impassioned than what she was supposed to do, which was just supposed to shoot them. And you know what I mean? So I kind of took that as another indication that the person was having more control than what she was.
That's interesting. That hadn't occurred to me, but I mean, I think that's equally plausible. It wasn't clear.
Yeah.
I didn't need it to be clear.
No,
but
it didn't really matter in the end, but
it was a hanging question. It goes into the bucket of this operator is exercising less and less control.
Yeah.
And the implication is that she used to be sort of the best. She used to be the kind of go-to, like, get it done agent. At one point, her boss is like, I'm grooming. Now, you don't know if she's messing with her or if she's being serious, but she says, I'm sort of grooming you to be my replacement, ultimately. So that's both a vote of confidence, but you can't really trust that boss. That boss is definitely
because she wants to. towards the end, she keeps the Tasia is trying to get out of the guy. So she'll say when she's ready
Pull
to
me out.
be pulled out, she's like, take me out or get me out or whatever. And she just kept wanting to her to stay in there longer, which was, probably detrimental to her sanity or whatever. Another thing that I wondered,
she hadn't finished the job though either,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And that's ultimately, that was another thing. Again, some of this I might be reading too much into it, but I kind of wondered if he was making a little bit of a commentary also about the idea that this seemed to be in the beginning. I thought it was that she was a spy, like she worked for some kind of a government agency, and then I think they were just a corporation, and I kind of wondered if he was making a little bit of a commentary to an extreme degree of how terrible corporations are, that it's like they literally, the boss acts like she cares about her, but at the end it's, ultimately it's the job and the money, and she doesn't really care about her as a person or her sanity or any of that.
No, I think that's loud and clear throughout. The only two examples of sort of the company we see are the assassination company and the Facebook company, and they're both sociopathic.
Yeah.
I mean, neither one of them cares a single whit about human life or privacy or decency or any of that.
Yeah.
It's just clearly. And then what's interesting is to see what that has done to the actual human beings who work in those companies.
Right. Exactly.
And the company doesn't feel like such an outgrowth of Sean Bean as much as Sean Bean feels like the pilot of the company.
Mm-hmm.
That you could kill Sean Bean. In fact, they do. They want to kill Sean Bean so that they can take over the company. They can take control of the company. It's not about Sean Bean. It's about the company.
Yeah.
And that's not a new criticism of corporations. I think it's an apt criticism of corporations, but it's a bleak argument, and it's a bleak feeling movie. And there's a lot of blood, and a lot of people get stabbed in the neck, and jets of blood squirt out of their neck, and people writhe around in literal pools of their own blood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very bloody movie. I didn't find that as disturbing as Bone Tomahawk.
No.
That one was really upsetting, and this was like, yikes, that hurts. Like, ooh, right in the jugular, But I wasn't like, oh, I just was like, oh, yeah, oh, still pumping.
But one thing
a lot of blood.
One thing that I was thinking about that. So I have a Roku. So, I went and searched on Roku, and, there were several different streaming services that you could watch this through. I watched it on Prime, but there's an uncut version of this, and which I think you had to pay like $10 for or something. So I'm not going to watch the uncut. And there was only a minute difference between the
what?
Yeah, only a minute.
Oh my god,
a minute difference. But I got to thinking, okay, between this,
I bet you could Google that minute.
Probably could, yeah. And I looked, and they said it's just they cut out a little bit of violence and some sex. But I got to thinking, so between this and Bone Tomahawk that we watched last week, that were both rated R movies. Like, what does it take? What does a movie have to and both really graphic films. What does it take now that a movie, would be so extreme that it can't get an R rating? You know what I mean? What is there left?
Honestly, I mean, to answer that feels like a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
My honest answer to it would have to be sex.
Yeah.
Or I feel like if the violence felt pornographic in its intent. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Mm-hmm.
If it felt like the violence was sexualized in a way that crossed a line, and I don't know how to give you an example of that because I can't think of one.
Yeah, I know what you mean, though.
That it would get an NC-17 rating or whatever, not NR. Is it just NR? Do they even rate movies X anymore? Or
I think
don't
they
know.
do NC-17, or it can be unrated, but nothing above an R gets in theaters.
But I think, if it's sexual and if you see penetrate, I mean,
Yeah,
if it's
that would
I
be
think
for sure.
seeing the naked body is okay, is permissible if it's done in a quote unquote, and I'm not talking, these are not my terms, but what I imagine the board thinks is, if it's within the boundaries of taste, you can get away with it. Full frontal male nudity rarely makes it in, although occasionally full frontal female nudity does.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see butts and breasts, and you can see people having sex as long as you're not actually seeing the act.
Yeah.
But the minute you start to see anything objectionable, like penetration, they're just like, nope.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting, because in some ways the violence, like sex, is something that is not inherently destructive. It's inherently creative. And it's something that I think the vast majority of human adults is going to do in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas murder, I would like to think, I'm sure it happens. I know it happens all the time. I'd like to think of it as an unnatural act. That's depicted with great abandon. And in this movie, the human body is violated in many ways by knives and guns and bullets and, just repeated, like, hacking with a butcher knife and whacking him with that pole, and keep cutting back to his face, and he jams it down his throat. It's just like, I use this word a little casually in this context, but they have elements of rape. It is a vicious violation of another human body. And blood everywhere, and yet they're like, yeah, okay, R.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute, so he's having sex with his girlfriend, and maybe there's a point where you see too much of her butt. Maybe you see her butthole for a second. They're like, no, 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 no. And I'm not necessarily arguing that it, I don't have I don't have a platform that I'm trying to preach here. I just think it's interesting that in America, a absolutely unforgettable level of violence is permissible as an R rating, but the actual depiction of intercourse on screen is just unpermissible.
Mm-hmm. And that's always been the thing that America has always had hangups about versus, say, the Europeans, for example. It's kind of the opposite, where it's like, European films, it's sometimes, there's a lot of nudity or there's sex in them or whatever, and that's just viewed as that's okay. And whereas here, like you're saying, it's like, well, you can have as much violence as you want. That's perfectly fine. But if there's a certain degree of nudity or sex or whatever, then that's not permissible. You kind of wonder if, as we get to more and more stream, and, there's time. Now, this movie, I looked up the numbers. I don't know how many theaters it was in, but it only made $800,000. So it was released not widely. But over time, increasingly, just movies like this aren't going to make it into theaters probably at all. These kind of things will just go straight to streaming. And then, do those ratings even mean anything anymore?
Right.
They can,
right.
Do you, you kind of guess maybe some of these boundaries would be, or restrictions or whatever would be kind of loosened. They could show whatever they want as far as violence. They could show whatever they want as far as sex, and if it's just for unless, I suppose the streaming services could have certain standards. I mean, I guess maybe Netflix, they're not going to have like hardcore pornography or something like that on there,
Right.
but
Right.
it just, at some point they would just circumvent any kind of ratings board, and it's like, this is just what it is. There's no rating, or it might say, 18 and over, and that's it. But yeah,
Right.
I just thought that was kind of interesting watching this. I was just like, wow. And again, I don't have any problem with any of this, but I just thought, man, this is, 2 weeks in a row, these extremely violent movies, and they're
Right.
R-rated, and it's like, what do you have to do from a violence standpoint
Right.
for it to
To
be not
trip a
acceptable,
switch. Right.
What's that?
Well, Bone Tomahawk, at least, from the very opening scene where there are these two outlaws murdering this band of cowboys, like, we don't know anything. It says, the titles play, and then we hear the sound of a guy's throat being cut, and then the lights come up, and there's a guy that, we see the guy
Mm-hmm.
making the sound by cutting the throat. And I think, if anything, if you go, oh, well, no, thank you, then I guess the movie could fairly say, well, we warned you right off the top, right? It's that kind of movie. You don't always get that per se, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I mean, I guess if you sit through that, it still doesn't prepare you for a guy getting cut in half and eaten. But I don't know. I mean, R rating doesn't prepare you for that.
No.
It it doesn't. I don't know. I'm not advocating for like open pornography,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like it's hard as we have this discussion, it's hard to draw that line.
Yeah.
Like, where it depends on who you hand the red pen to, because, excuse me, who one person might be offended by this or that, or another person might not, and it's going to differ from person to person. And I'm not personally offended by nudity in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But, nudity can be presented on screen in a hugely wide variety of ways. And you can have a very, very upsetting scene that doesn't involve quote unquote pornographic depiction of, sex, but it can still be, an image, say, depicting rape that is extremely upsetting.
Right.
But it didn't technically, you didn't see anything. And you're like, I saw enough like that. I'm never going to forget that. Like, that was really upsetting. So if you just say you can see one breast and one buttock, but no, and then it's like, you can't really, you have to kind of look at the thing itself and say, what are we doing? I mean, I guess they have to have some rules. I mean,
Sure.
somebody has to have some kind of guideline, but
And there was a neat, neat. I don't know if it's the right word, but I thought there was a clever.
neat.
There was a clever thing that he did in the director did in this movie, exactly along the lines of what you're talking about, which I'm sure he was making a statement with this. There's when you're talking about that you can't show penetration. There's a scene where when she goes to spend the night with her husband, and they're having sex, and he's on top of her, and you see her face, and they zoom in on her face, and they do a quick cut to a knife going into this man's throat that she had killed early in the movie. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I imagine he was probably saying, I can't show penetration in a sexual sense, but I can show this knife going into this guy's throat, and
penetrating
that's perfectly
throat,
okay within a scene of sex happening. I thought that was a clever little thing.
Yeah, well,
that he
we're
did
talking
there.
about it. I mean, I think that was all very deliberate.
Oh, yeah,
I think
definitely.
he's illustrating that he's, he's a filmmaker that's playing with a lot of these ideas, and the film has got us talking about all of these ideas. And I think, those are all successes of the film. I think, just zooming back out for a second, I think they market it as a horror movie because they're hoping to get more people to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have produced a movie that we sold and that was taken, and it was not a zombie movie, but it was marketed as a zombie movie. And I know that I read the reviews. A lot of people saw the movie who was just huge zombie enthusiasts and were bitterly disappointed in our movie because, as I said, it is not a zombie movie.
Right.
But it was very deliberately marketed in that way, and that's a crappy move. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying you listen to the trailer and you watch the trailer, and I was actually a little scared to see this movie. I thought, oh man,
It looks
this looks
pretty
pretty intense.
freaky from
I
the
don't know if I can get through
trailer.
this,
Yeah.
but I got through it.
Yeah.
Bone Tomahawk was more upsetting to me.
Yeah, it's not really a frightening film. And him as a director, I think it's kind of interesting.
But it is an interesting film.
Yeah, very much so. And this is just the second movie that he's directed. He directed another one in 2012 called Antiviral, which I think got some pretty good buzz at the time. So I don't really know why. The only other thing that he's done is a short, like a 10-minute short in between. But so I don't really know why it was so long in between films for him. But he's definitely a guy I'd like to see. And this has gotten a good bit of buzz, but he's definitely a guy that I'd like to see more from him.
Well, so we're just getting towards time. In terms of what we want to kind of wrap this up, would you recommend this to people?
Yeah, I definitely would. I mean, I think people, as I said, I think this kind of felt like had a Black Mirror vibe to it. So people who like Black Mirror, it has that bleak kind of feeling, and we're not exactly sure when it is in the future. It's kind of a near future as we get in a lot of Black Mirror episodes. And as we, this isn't for the squeamish. It's definitely, there's a lot of blood and, some pretty brutal killings. But yeah, I mean, people who like, it's not a sci-fi, as you said, with spaceships and laser beams and all of that, but more kind of, if you like cerebral, kind of thought-provoking sci-fi, then this is worth a watch.
I agree 100%. And I think your evocation of Black Mirror is perfect. So if you're looking for something to scare the pants off of you, as the trailer and the promo stuff that I've seen seems to imply, I would just say take note. It doesn't feel like that movie to me. It does feel like a feature-length episode of Black Mirror with Black Mirror's got a lot of times has a kind of a cheeky wink feel to it. It's like before it twists the knife, it's like, gotcha, or something. There's sort of a playful feeling to a lot of it. And this doesn't have any playfulness in it. There's no playfulness in this movie, but it is definitely thought-provoking and thought through. And if you're into sort of bloody, it's not horror per se, but it's definitely bloody. And a lot of stabbing and stuff, then I would say it's worth watching, but it's a little misleading in the marketing of it. So, in terms of next week, what shall we watch for next time, my friend?
We talked about a couple more in the vein of the cheesy and campy and all that. So we talked about that Kill and Kill Again, which is a early 80s martial arts movie, but we also talked about The Hand starring Michael Caine, which you seemed intrigued with. Which of those do you think you'd want to watch, or something else?
Well, let's do both of those. But which should we do next? I'm ready for some corny. Let's go to Kill and Kill Again,
Okay,
because that looks like that might be campy fun, and then we'll decide whether we want to follow it. We definitely want to get to The Hand,
yeah,
which is exactly what you imagined it is, but it's got Michael Caine in the lead.
Yep. And it's either written or directed by Oliver Stone. So
what?
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Man, I don't know. Should we watch that?
Let's do it next.
All right, so we're gonna do The Hand. Michael Caine stars in a movie about
The guy that loses his hand, and then
you're like, could it be? And you're like, yes, it is.
yep.
So we're gonna watch that. Watch that with us for next time, and we will we'll talk to you next week.
See you, everybody.